Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Andrew Harries. Andrew's been a co-founder or lead investor in 3 startups, all of which exited, one through IPO, 2 by acquisitions. He's a valued business advisor, corporate director, was the chair of Science World, and continues to advise them as their mission closely aligns with his view that science and technology literacy are critical elements of a society's long-term viability. Andrew holds 3 U.S. patents, and he's an alum of our MBA program, and for a few years has been our Tom Ford Professor of Practice and Innovation Entrepreneurship, teaches courses in innovation, product management, and resourcing new ventures. So thanks for being with us, Andrew. I'm Jervis Bush. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor of leadership and organization development at Beedie as well. And I'm going to be curious about what Andrew has to say, given that every day of the current crisis, we're learning more about how serious it is and what we should do about it, and how long it'll be before we recover. So tell me, Andrew, how do you think leaders are going to be able to process all this information and decide what to do?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Jervis. The first thing I would say is that hope is not a strategy. And I would just like to, all my students will have heard me saying that many times. We can't wish this situation away. And we need to assume that the plan that we built for this year is out the window. And we need to process the information that's now available to us. Reality has changed. So I guess I would say that the way I see it is we've received wave after wave of information about this since January. The first wave was, oh, it's a China problem. The second wave was it's an Asia problem. The third wave was, this could be a nasty global flu. And now, really, just in the last week, we've come to discover that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So I think societies and businesses have been really slow to react to this situation. We can talk another time about why that is, but I think we all have been very slow in the West in particular to react. And now we need to, as business leaders, gather what information is coming our way and process it to figure out what our plan looks like. I think, as you mentioned, the things we really need to focus on right now is how deep the problem will be, how long we'll be in business in an interrupted situation, like everyone's in a lockdown, and then how quickly business will recover once we get to the other side. And so there's a variety of ways that we can measure data that's coming our way to figure out those things for our business.
Well, specifically, what kind of data do you think leaders need to be looking for?
Yeah, well, I mean, governments, every day we're getting new information from governments on new daily infection rates, daily mortality rates, social distancing timeframes or isolation timeframes, unemployment levels, and types of government support. So all of these things are really critical for business leaders to process every day. But we can't wait for certainty. We're getting new information every day and every week, but we can't wait. We need to act now by locking in certain assumptions. So, we need to figure out, first of all, how deep this disruption is going to be. Can customers buy or use our product at all? I mean, it's quite conceivable that if customers have to go to a retail outlet or a venue to consume our product, we're selling nothing. So the first question is, how deep will the disruption be? And I think the trickier question is, how long will this disruption last? Mm-hmm. And I think just in the last couple of days, we've come to realize that we're moving from what most people seem to think was a V-shaped recovery with a fairly short, sharp shock to the economy and to our businesses, to something that's starting to look like more of a U-shaped recovery. I'm hearing now that we could still be in social isolation or lockdown into May. And if that's true, then I think that's the reason why we're seeing some more volatility in the financial markets, because I think most of us were assuming, like I said, a short, sharp shock with a V-shaped recovery. Mm-hmm. So if it's really true that we're going to have a longer time period before we're all let out of here and we can actually go back to work, mm-hmm. then there's certain data that business leaders need to monitor on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. I guess the first thing is new daily infection rates in your markets or in your community. This is a global problem, but where you do business and where you sell, what are the new daily infection rates? You could say that if we had flat or dropping infection rates for 5 days in a row, let's say, you could safely infer that we had reached the peak in that particular market or community. And then you may be able to extrapolate from there as to some point in the future where we all may be back to some sort of semblance of normality. The trick with making that extrapolation, of course, is that in countries like China, Singapore, Taiwan, where they did a good job of getting on top of this fairly early, and the curve, they'd flattened the curve and the daily infection rate was declining. Once they started to reopen for business, they started to see infection rates increasing again.
Right.
And so I guess when public policy makers decide that it's okay for us to all come out and go to work again, they're going to be making a risk-reward trade-off.
Right.
And that's going to be super difficult. I don't envy them the task.
How's that even going to happen before either we have a vaccine or we have a way to test rapidly and widespreadly?
Well, that is the question. I mean, we can't all remain locked up forever. And so at some point, either there'll be enough immunity in the community because enough people have had it,
right,
or we've managed to corner the infection to a point where we think we can contain it. We can maybe go back to work with social distance. But it's really unclear to me how we get back to what we considered normal pre this pandemic in the absence of an effective therapy or vaccine. I think that's a really important point. And like I said, there'll be a trade-off between the risks and the rewards so long as a vaccine doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, if business comes back in the next, 3 to 4 weeks, great. But it seems to me that leaders have to be planning for the assumption that it's going to last a lot longer than that. So what do you think they need to be looking from a business specific data to analyze and decide what to do now?
Well, I think every business is going to have to cut costs. I don't think that's really an option. The only question is, by how much do you have to cut? Will it involve people? How do you do it? But like I said, you should assume your plan is a goner, and that a new plan needs to be cast with less cost in it. So I would say that burning cash is super risky right now because we don't know when the other side of this U will arrive. And so I think we need to understand first and foremost how much cash we have, using some fairly pessimistic assumptions about how quickly our revenues are going to return. And of course, how much cash runway you have varies wildly depending on the type of business you're in. On the one hand, if you're in hospitality or retail, you may be generating zero business. It could be binary. You have no business because you're closed, or you're open and you're generating some semblance of business. On the other hand, if you sell mission critical enterprise software on subscription, then I think you have a fairly predictable revenue profile, unless of course your customers actually go out of business. So the type of business
or stop paying their bills.
Well, right. But I mean, if you're mission critical, that's why I threw in the mission critical, because I think this is when you quickly discover when your product is a vitamin or a painkiller. The painkiller people will need it and they'll pay you for it. If you're a vitamin, you'll see high and alarming rates of churn.
Right.
So I guess the other thing I would say is that there are a number of specific assumptions you need to make before you recast your plan. I'd say the first one is, are your current customers for whom you have already delivered product paying you? Or do you have a receivables problem? Because if you're not getting paid for work already done or services already delivered, then you very quickly need to figure out why that is, when you're going to be paid, and whether you have a serious cash flow problem coming at you. The second thing is how predictable, just as we discussed, is the revenue you generate from existing customers.
Mm-hmm.
If they're on subscription and you're a painkiller, not a vitamin, you're not going to see a lot of churn unless, as you point out, your customers actually go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So again, figuring out how dependable your revenues are from existing customers. The third thing you need to figure out is, in your business plan, you make assumptions about new customer acquisition. So new sales. But is anybody selling anything in your business right now? Are all your customers quarantining at home? Is there anyone even there to answer the phones? Are they preoccupied, and do they care about buying something new? So you need to test the assumptions you made in your business plan about acquiring new customers. And then the fourth thing is, how long is this going to go on?
Yeah.
And then lastly, I should say, if you're burning cash, one of the things that you may be trying to do is raise new money through a financing.
Mm-hmm.
You may be halfway there and not have closed. You need to be checking in with your investors, even those who've told you they're committed, to make sure they're actually going to make good on those commitments, because some businesses are halfway through a financing and they're going to realize their investors are no longer up to the challenge. And then they could be making a flawed assumption about cash replenishment.
Right.
And then, so there's 5 things there, just to recap. Do you have a receivables problem? Do you have predictability with current customers? Can you sell to new customers? How long until the other side of this? And then finally, if you're doing a financing, are you going to be able to complete it? Once you've taken care of those five things as a management team, take it to your board, sort out what you think your baseline assumptions are, recast your plan, figure out how much cost you need to take out of the business in order to survive. Because, as I said at the top, survival of the enterprise is the most important thing right now. And so I've spoken to a number of people who've said, I'm torn between keeping my people on board and my cash situation. Don't get confused about that. The government is stepping up to provide you with support to gracefully move people that you can't afford to keep on your payroll onto the government's. Mm-hmm. But the most important thing is that you remain in business, so that when this is over, they have jobs to come back to, mm-hmm. and your customers still have a supplier.
Right. From a public policy point of view, I've been impressed with what's going on in Europe, where instead of paying individuals to be on unemployment, they're taking over company payrolls, so that those people are actually still connected to the business. And when things get better, you can know that you have employees, you can ramp right up quickly.
Well, right. And I mean, if you think about previous serious recessions, you could walk down any main street and half of the retail storefronts would be boarded up. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody wants to see that under these circumstances. The economy was in fundamentally good shape beforehand. Mm-hmm. And provided this doesn't last too long, it should be in fundamentally good shape afterwards. Okay. And if in the meantime, governments allow these businesses that rely on short-term cash flow, if they allow them to go out of business, we're going to have a really serious unemployment problem. Right. So I think if you're thinking that, if you realize you have to shed people, you need to look very closely at what payroll subsidy programs are available in your market. Mm-hmm. Most jurisdictions now are doing what you just said, which is directly paying companies to keep their people on board. In Canada here, we move people to EI, which isn't as graceful, but the government's made it fairly seamless to move people over. You're getting a 75% wage subsidy. They're allowing you, to the best of my knowledge, to top up. Mm-hmm. And then other things that you need to think about is, are you allowed to top up if your people are being subsidized by the government? Number one, can you maintain people's benefits if they have extended medical benefits or other benefits? Can you maintain those so that people are furloughed, not effectively terminated? Mm-hmm. Other things that I think are really goodwill gestures are, you can retain people's accrued vacation time so that when they come back, those sorts of benefits are still intact. Mm-hmm. And then as I know you're going to talk about, communication. You know,
Yeah.
what is happening? Why is this happening? Why do we have to do this? And what do we think it's going to look like on the other side?
Right. Well, I hear your message about, the immediate issue is survival and
Mm-hmm.
everything you need to do. But is that the only thing leaders should be thinking about at the moment?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I'm always thinking offense, not just defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're asking a great question there. The ability to look for opportunities in the midst of all of this really depends on what exactly your circumstances are. I mean, if you're in a really precarious situation, you're not thinking offense. You're thinking only about survival, and maintaining your workforce intact to the best of your ability to get to the other side. If you have more of a wherewithal, if you have some cycles available to be thinking about what opportunities might come out of all of this, then I would really, really encourage it. I mean, we think about all of the things, all of the types of behavioral changes that we have experienced in academia, for example, and also in my consulting practice. We're not traveling. We're not having face-to-face meetings.
That's right.
Somehow the work is getting done. We're learning about new ways of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
And the question for you has to be, what else are your customers discovering they could do differently?
Mm-hmm.
And would that impact the value proposition that you deliver them? Does it in fact impact the type of product or service you deliver them? Does it open you up to threats or potential disruptions? There could be a variety of opportunities here. So whoever gets closest to the customer wins. That's always the rule. But right now, if you stay really close to your customers and you pay special attention to the lessons that they're learning about the way they do business coming out of this,
right,
there could be some really significant opportunities.
Yeah. And, I just amplify that and I'd say, this too shall pass. And so, business leaders need to be thinking not just about now, but where do they want to be 6 months from now or 8 months from
Exactly.
now? Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Andrew, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you to all our viewers. I hope you all stay healthy and safe and that we get through this together.
Hear, hear.
Thanks. Bye-bye.